You ever notice how the people who doubt themselves the most are usually the ye ones who actually care about doing things right? Meanwhile, the loudest, most overconfident people in the room often have no idea what they're doing, but somehow they're the ones getting promoted, getting listened to, getting picked. If that hits a nerve, stay with me for a second, because right now, while you're second-guessing yourself about your work, your relationships, your future, there's a very old, very sharp mind from the 1500s that would look at your life and say, you don't have a confidence problem. You have a strategy problem. That mind is Niccolò Machiavelli, the guy everyone loves to quote when they want to sound ruthless, or edgy, the guy people think only tyrants read. But underneath all the drama and reputation, Machiavelli spent his life asking a brutally practical question. How does someone surrounded by chaos, doubt, and risk still manage to win? And that is exactly your situation. Not because you're running a kingdom, but because you're trying to run a life. A career where people half as capable as you seem 10 times more confident. A relationship or family where you downplay your needs because you're scared of conflict. A mind that knows you're capable of more but keeps whispering, who do you think you are? So in the next few minutes, I want you to imagine something a bit weird. Imagine Machiavelli is not coaching a prince. He's coaching you not to manipulate people, not to be fake, but to use the same principles of power, perception, and strategy to go from self-doubt to quiet, unshakable confidence. Confidence you can actually feel when you wake up on Monday and don't immediately dread opening your email. Confidence you can feel when you speak in a meeting and for once you don't replay it 100 times, afterwards wondering if you sounded stupid. Confidence in how you carry yourself when you walk into a room, into your home, into your own mind. So let's start with something Machiavelli understood better than most modern self-help books. The world does not reward the most talented person. It rewards the person who looks and acts like they belong in the position they want. Unfair, completely. But if you've been alive for more than 25 years, you already know this is true. You've seen people promoted because they seem like leadership material. You've watched someone you're more qualified than get chosen because they projected certainty. And every time that happens, if you struggle with self-doubt, you probably tell yourself a story. Well, I'm just not that kind of person. I'm not charismatic. I'm not born confident. I'm more of a behind-the-scenes type. Machiavelli would roll his eyes at that. He famously said, "It is not necessary for a prince to have all the good qualities, but it is very necessary to appear to have them." Translated for you and me, confidence is not a personality trait. It's a performance you practice until it becomes your default. That doesn't mean being fake. It means choosing which version of you lead with. You already do this, by the way. You're slightly different with your boss than with your best friend. You're different at a job interview than when you're half asleep on the couch at 11 p.m. So the real question isn't, am I authentic? The real question is, which authentic parts of me am I choosing to put in charge? The insecure apologizing, shrinking you, or the version of you that occasionally shows up when you're helping a friend, solving a problem, or talking about something you actually understand? Machiavelli would tell you to make that stronger version your public face, even if it feels a bit uncomfortable at first. So let's get practical. Think about one area of your life where self-doubt keeps ambushing you. Maybe it's speaking up at work. Maybe it's dating. Maybe it's parenting decisions. Maybe it's money. Got it? Don't just vaguely think my whole life. Pick one battlefield. Now, in that battlefield, ask yourself, if I already believed I belong here, how would I carry myself differently? Not how would you magically feel? Feelings are slow. They catch up later. Ask how you would act. Would you speak a little slower instead of rushing? Your words? Would you stop over-explaining every sentence with nervous laughter? Would you prepare your thoughts before the meeting instead of winging it and then beating yourself up? Would you stop, adding, "I don't know, maybe I'm wrong"? Every time you share an idea, that's your first Machiavellian move. You change how you show up before your brain gives you permission. You outfit your outer behavior like armor, even while your inner world is still shaking. You might hear that and think, but isn't that fake? Isn't that manipulative? Let's be honest, you're already manipulating things. You're just doing it in the worst possible direction. You're manipulating people's perception of you downward. You apologize too much so they see you as less competent. You stay quiet so they assume you have nothing to add. You downplay your achievements so they forget about them when opportunities appear. What we're doing now is simply shifting the game in your favor. You're not lying about your abilities. You're stopping yourself from constantly lying against them. That's the first principle. Appearance leads, feelings follow. But Machiavelli had another lesson that's even deeper. And if you get this, your confidence won't just be louder. It'll be rooted. Machiavelli talked a lot about power being tied to your state, your territory, your resources, your alliances. A ruler who has no real base of power, but only a fancy title is always anxious, always paranoid, always one bad day away from collapse. You know who else lives like that? The person whose confidence is just positive affirmations with number and substance behind them. So here's the second principle. Build real power in a few key areas of your life, and your confidence will stop feeling like a costume and start feeling like a fact. Let's try something together. I want you to silently do a power audit of your life. Ask, where am I genuinely strong? Not perfect strong. Maybe you're that person who always follows through once. You commit. Maybe you have 10, 15, 20 years experience in a field, and you're quietly excellent at your craft. Even if you don't brag about it, maybe you are insanely loyal as a friend, or irritatingly good at staying calm when everyone else panics. Those are not small things. Those are sources of real power. Now ask another question. Where am I pretending to be weak just because I'm used to doubting myself? You might say things like, "Oh, I'm terrible with the people," when actually in one-on-one conversations, you're great. You just feel awkward in big groups. Or, "I'm bad with money," when really you just never had a system and nobody taught you. But you learn fast when you actually decide to. Machiavelli would tell you, stop ruling your life based on old stories. A smart ruler reorganizes their state. They invest in the strategic parts that give the most leverage for you. That means choose one arena where you will become obviously competent, not good enough to get by. Obviously competent. Maybe it's your main skill at work. Writing, coding, organizing, negotiating. Maybe it's the physical. Practice, lifting, running, yoga. Something that reminds you I can do hard things and see progress. Maybe it's one role. I will become a reliable, grounded parent, or I will become financially literate. Whatever you pick, that becomes your base, your territory. You fortify it. You actually study. You practice. You ask for feedback. You set a measurable target and track progress. Instead of vaguely hoping you'll get better someday. Why does this matter for confidence? Because when you know deep down, I am undeniably good at this one thing, something changes in your posture. Toward the rest of life, you start thinking like a ruler with a secure city behind them, not a drifter begging everyone else to tell them who they are. And here's the hidden bonus. The discipline you build in that one arena leaks everywhere. The courage it takes to ask your boss for clear feedback is the same courage you use to have a hard conversation at home. The patience it takes to learn a new skill is the same patience you use to rebuild your finances. This is not random. This is architecture. You are architecting real power, which naturally gives rise to calmer confidence. Now Machiavelli had another obsession environment. He knew that even a strong ruler could be crushed if they misread the forces around them. In your life, your environment is everything that keeps triggering your self-doubt on repeat. The people who constantly second guesses you, the digital noise that makes you feel behind every time you scroll, the daily routine that leaves you exhausted and then guilty for being exhausted. Most people try to fix their confidence by screaming at themselves in the mirror and saying, "Believe in yourself." But then they walk back into an environment that is perfectly designed to make them feel small. Machiavelli would not waste time on that. He'd say, if the city walls are full of holes, you fix the walls. So let's talk about your walls, look at your typical day, not the fantasy day you wish you had, the real one. Where are the moments you feel your confidence dip the hardest? Maybe it's the first 10 minutes after you wake up, when you immediately check your phone and see emails, news, bills, and someone on social media bragging about their perfect life. Maybe it's after a meeting with a specific person who always manages to make you feel inferior. Maybe it's late at night when the house is quiet and every regret and failure you've ever had decides to come out and throw a party in your head. Those are the moments Machiavelli would fortify. You don't need to fix your whole life in one day. You just need to redesign a few key choke points where things go off the rails. For example, if the first 10 minutes of your day are wrecking your mood, your first move is not to meditate for an hour and become a monk. Your first move might just be, for the first 10 minutes after waking up, I do not touch my phone. Instead, I drink water, breathe, and ask myself, what would make today a win? Even in a small way, tiny, but strategic. If there's a person who constantly chips away at your confidence, your move might be decide in advance what topics you will not engage with them about and what your boundaries are. You don't walk into the conversation defenseless. You pick your battles. If your confidence collapses at night, your move might be to give your brain a different job than replay every mistake you've ever made. You could literally spend 5 minutes writing down 3 things you handled well that day, even if they're small. Showed up to work despite being tired, didn't snap at my kid when I wanted to, sent that uncomfortable email. That's not cheesy. Gratitude journaling, that's record keeping. That's you as the ruler of your mind, maintaining your own archives instead of letting anxiety forge all the documents. See how different this is from just be confident. We're not asking your emotions to magically change. We're changing what your environment and your actions are doing to you every day. So, confidence becomes the logical result, not a miracle. Now, there's a tough truth Machiavelli would absolutely throw at you, and I say this with love. You are waiting for confidence to show up before you act, but confidence is waiting for you to act before it shows up. He wrote about fortune favoring the prepared and the bold. The idea is simple. The more you prepare your position, the more aggressively you're allowed to move. Translate that to you. The more you prepare, the less you have to rely on raw courage. A lot of your self-doubt isn't because you're broken. It's because you keep walking into important situations underprepared and then blaming your personality. If you're anxious before presentations, but you only glance at your notes the night before, that's not a confidence issue. That's a strategy issue. If you feel small in conversations about money, but you've never spent 2 hours reading about the basics of finance, that's not a destiny issue. That's a preparation issue. So here's a very Machiavellian question to ask yourself before anything that matters. If this moment were a battle, what would preparation look like? If it's a conversation you've been avoiding, preparation might be writing down the one main point you need to communicate instead of trying to wing it. While emotions are high, if it's a job interview, preparation might be practicing answers out loud, researching the company, even rehearsing your opening line so your voice doesn't crack on the first sentence. If it's setting a say, boundary with someone in your family. Preparation might be deciding ahead of time what you will do if they respond badly, so you're not caught off guard. When you start living this way, something shifts. You're no longer the helpless subject of your emotions. You're the strategist. You still feel fear, but you meet it with plans instead of panic, which leads us straight into another piece of this playbook, fear. There's this famous debate in Machiavelli's work about whether it's better to be loved or feared. You've probably heard that quote thrown around by people trying to justify being a jerk. The part people forget is that Machiavelli also said a ruler should avoid being hated, and that fear should be managed carefully so it doesn't backfire. Here's how I want you to use this. Stop trying to get rid of fear. Use it. Your fear is already ruling you. It decides which emails you avoid, which phone calls you don't return, which dreams you delay, which conversations you swallow. But fear can also be your advisor. Instead of asking, how do I stop feeling afraid? Ask, what is this fear trying to protect, and how can I protect it in a smarter way? If you're scared of speaking up at work, what are you really afraid of? Looking stupid, losing your job, being judged. Okay, which of those are real risks and which are just vague shadows? Maybe losing your job is extremely unlikely just because you asked a question so that fear can chill. But maybe your fear is telling you haven't thought this idea through yet. You're not ready to defend it. In that case, fear is actually giving you useful information. Prepare more, sharpen your point. Or if you're afraid of leaving a toxic situation, a job, a relationship, fear might be saying, we don't have enough money saved. We don't have a backup plan. Again, that's useful. It doesn't mean stay forever. It means build your exit strategy like a patient strategist, not like a panicked rebel. Machiavelli would never tell a ruler to charge blindly into battle just to prove their brand brave. He'd say, if you must risk, do it with your eyes open and your logistics ready. Your version of that might look like, instead of fantasizing about quitting your job in a blaze of glory, you quietly start building skills, contacts, and savings so that in 6 months, leaving is not an act of desperation, but a calculated move. That alone can take your confidence from shaky to solid because you're no longer terrified of every change. You know you can navigate. Now, I want to talk to the part of you that's tired, because if you're between 25 and 50, there's a good chance life has thrown enough at you that you've started to internalize a really heavy story. I guess this is just who I am now. The person who doesn't quite measure up, the person who always chokes, the one who almost gets there but never fully arrives. That story might be based on real experiences. Maybe you did freeze in that meeting. Maybe that relationship did fall apart. Maybe that business idea did fail. Machiavelli was not a romantic. He wouldn't ask you to pretend those things didn't happen, but he would absolutely ask you who benefits from you, keeping that story as your final identity. Because in politics and in life, stories are weapons. If your inner narrative is, I'm the one who never quite makes it, what jobs will you not apply for? What boundaries will you not set? What opportunities will you sabotage? Because deep down, you don't believe you're the kind of person who gets to have them. Seen this way, your self-doubt isn't just a feeling. It's a regime. It's a political system inside your mind that keeps you compliant. And Machiavelli would say, if a regime is harmful to the state, you overthrow it. How do you overthrow an inner regime of self-doubt? Not with cheesy slogans. With a campaign, start by challenging the evidence it uses against you. When your brain says, you always mess this up, you ask, always? Name 5 recent times. You'll notice it suddenly gets very vague. Or you might realize, okay, I messed it up twice in the last 10 years. That's not destiny, that's 2 data points. When your brain says, yay, you're just not leadership material, you can literally respond. According to who? Based on what? You dig into the story like a skeptical advisor who refuses to accept lazy thinking. If that sounds strange, try it once today. The next time you catch a harsh thought running through your mind as if it's just reporting the news, pause and talk back to it, not with toxic positivity, but with cross-examination. Over time, that inner critic will stop being a dictator and start being just one voice at the table. And this is where Machiavelli's sense of identity comes in. He believed rulers needed to consciously shape their image both outward and inward. You need to shape yours. I want you to imagine just for a moment a version of you 5 years from now who has done the work we're talking about. They have 1 or 2 solid areas of power where they are clearly competent. They've adjusted their environment so it doesn't constantly drain them. They act with preparation, not chaos. They listen to fear, but it doesn't run the show. How do they walk? Into a room? How do they answer the question? So what do you do? How do they handle it when someone is rude or dismissive? Do they crumble for 3 days? Or do they feel the sting and then move on? Now here's the key. That version of you is not a fantasy superhero. That person is you plus 5 years of Machiavellian strategy. Your job starting now is not to become someone else. It's to start behaving as if that person is already under construction. When you're unsure what to do in a situation, ask, what would the 5 years from now me do? Here, they cue. And then take the smallest possible step in that direction. If the future, you would speak up confidently. Maybe present day, you simply asks one clarifying question instead of sitting silently. If the future you moves there, body regularly, maybe present day you just takes a 10-minute walk instead of nothing. If the future you has boundaries, maybe present you says, I need to think about that instead of saying yes automatically. This is how actual identity shifts through small, consistent acts of alignment, not overnight reinventions. And here's something you might need to hear. You are allowed to outgrow the version of you that other people are used to. Some people in your life are invested in the you who always doubts, always says yes, always plays small, not because they're evil, but because it keeps things predictable. When you start building unshakable confidence, you might get pushback. A boss might be surprised when you finally say, no, that deadline isn't realistic. A partner might feel uneasy when you finally express what you actually want. Friends, family, co-workers, they may all need time to adjust to the fact that you are no longer ruling your life like a scared caretaker, but like a strategic leader. Machiavelli would tell you, expect resistance. Don't take it as proof that you're doing something wrong. Take it as proof that you're changing the balance of power. And balance of power is exactly what confidence really is. It is not about never feeling insecure again. It's about the scales being tipped so far in favor of self-respect, preparation, and clarity that your doubts no longer get the final vote. So let's pull this together in a way you can actually use tomorrow morning, not just nod along to. First, choose your battlefield. Don't try to overhaul your entire life. Pick one area where self-doubt is costing you the most. Your work, your relationships, your health, your money. Second, decide your public face in that area. How does someone who belongs there act, not feel, act, borrow? That posture, that tone, that level of preparation, even if your stomach is doing somersaults. Third, build your base of power. Commit to becoming obviously competent at one thing that matters in that area. You don't need to be world-class, just undeniably solid. Give yourself 6 months of focused intention and see what happens. Fourth, fix your walls. Find the 2 or 3 moments in your day where your confidence gets ambushed and redesign them on purpose. Put guardrails in place. Change what you do in the first 10 minutes of your morning. How you handle draining people. What you feed your mind before bed. Fifth, use fear as An advisor, when it shows up, don't let it dictate policy. Ask what it's trying to protect. Separate real risks from imaginary ones and build a strategy accordingly. And finally, campaign against your old story. When your mind throws old failures at you as proof that you're doomed, interrogate the evidence. Start treating your identity like something you are actively crafting, not something that happened to you by accident. If this sounds like work, it is. Machiavelli never promised things would be easy. He just refused to lie about how power actually works. But here's the hopeful part. You don't have to get all of this perfect to feel a shift. You don't need to become a flawless, fearless person. You just need to be slightly more strategic than your self-doubt. If today you normally would have stayed quiet, but you speak once, that's a win. If tonight you normally would have spiraled for an hour, but you interrupt the spiral after 15 minutes and write down one thing you did well, that's a win. If next week you normally would have said yes automatically, but instead you say, "Let me get back to you," and give yourself space to decide, that's a win. Every one of those moments is you seizing another tiny piece of territory back from the regime of self-doubt. Over time, those moments add up. They become your new normal. One day you'll realize you handled something with a calm, grounded confidence that would have terrified you 5 years ago. And you'll think, wait, when did I become the kind of person who could do that? The answer will be, you became that person the moment you stopped treating confidence like a feeling you either have or don't have and started treating it like Machiavelli would, as something you build through strategy, through choices, through how you carry yourself long before you feel ready. So, if there's one thing I want you to take with you when this ends, it's this. You are not behind. You are not doomed to be the supporting character in everyone else's story. You're simply at the part of the story where the main character realizes no one is coming to crown them. They have to claim the throne themselves. That doesn't mean trampling other people. It means finally ruling your own life with the same seriousness, intelligence, and intentionality you'd expect from a leader you admire. Act as if you belong in your own life. Prepare like someone whose voice matters. Protect your energy like it's a kingdom worth defending. Question the inner voices that keep trying to overthrow you, and then little by little, day by day, become the person who doesn't just hope for confidence or pretend to have it for a few minutes at a time, but lives from a place of quiet, unshakable certainty. I may not control everything out there, but in here, in my choices, in my effort, in how I show up, I am the ruler. And from that place, everything else in your life starts to rearrange itself around